Hello, everyone. This is JT Keating, Vice President Product Strategy here at Zimperium. I would like to welcome you to another webinar. This is the beginning of a series of webinars that we're going to be doing about our new mobile app protection suite, why people need it, why people want it, what it actually is. Today's webinar is going to be kind of giving you the forest, and then we're going to dive into the trees over the next 3 weeks, the trees being the individual solutions. I'm really excited about this webinar. I always like doing webinars with my partner in crime, Scott King, who's a director of product marketing here at Zimperium, and particularly focused on the maps side of the world, which he is eats, sleeping, and breathing at this point. So Scott, thanks for joining me again.
It's a pleasure always, JT.
It's kind of fun to jive back and forth between the two of us, and so that way we can have a little bit of fun with the subject as well. So we're gonna dive in. Usual perfunctory stuff. We're gonna try and keep this to 20-25 minutes of content, about 5 minutes of Q&A if there is any. If there isn't, we don't make it up. We don't like to do that. And then there'll be an archived version of this up within a day or so, and we can make slides available to people as well. And then, of course, for our esteemed colleague in communications, I would be remiss if I didn't say, please follow us on social media. It happens to be great, whether it's Twitter or LinkedIn. Happens to be a great place to learn about mobile security in all ways, shapes, and forms. So with that, let us dive into our mobile app protection suite. And let's start with why anybody cares, right? So mobile apps, obviously critical to businesses these days. There's mobile apps that people are using for external purposes, where there's mobile banking or whatever. There's also apps that are being used internally in variations of BYOD, could be access to payroll systems, whatever the case may be. But while these apps are critical to the business now, they bring brand new risks. Security risks, privacy risks, regulatory risks at the kind of highest level. Examples of security risks are things like reverse engineering, exploitation. We're going to be talking about some of those. And what happens with that is, if some of those things occur, you can have data breaches and fraud, for instance. There's privacy risks in apps, including leaking PII. Obviously, some of this stuff is going to be related as we even get down to the regulatory side, GDPR, CCPA in California, et cetera. But clearly, if privacy is leaked, somewhat related to the breach side of things, there could be huge reputation damage. And then, of course, on the regulatory side, mentioning GDPR and some of the rest, if there's issues that these mobile apps expose information, et cetera, or deemed to not be protecting information, regulatory fines can happen. Whether it's the GDPR type stuff around privacy, or let's say in the case of Tesco a little while ago, just using it as an example, where there was X million pounds that were actually stolen directly from the mobile app, then the regulatory fines were about 10x the actual loss itself. So we all kind of get this. Mobile apps are out there, they're critical, but now how do we deal with some of these risks, right? So if you're a CISO, AppSec team, et cetera, we spend a lot of time with these people and a lot of time with folks like yourself. And it's basically, here are the challenges that the CISOs have told us about. On the development side of the world, they don't have any ability to know the actual compliance or risk posture of the apps before they're released, unless they have an expensive, lengthy pen test, which usually has to be done after development, because the development's not going to wait for these lengthy pen tests. So it's a little bit after the fact. So even at the very beginning, the mobile apps are basically Legos. You put a bunch of Legos together. So if a developer needs access to a camera, they'll go out on the internet, they'll grab a library or an SDK, and they'll throw that in there without even realizing, oh, by the way, it's sending traffic off unencrypted. It's sending traffic off to an unsecured cloud. It's sending traffic off to a foreign country, whatever. CISOs have no ability in line today to be able to determine if those risks even exist. But here's the bad news. That's an environment that is within the walls of the company. They control that. What happens when you actually put these apps out in the wild? one of the main things that is different about mobile apps compared to, let's say, web apps, with web apps, we control, as the company, we control the majority of the infrastructure that is providing the data and everything. Therefore, we can secure it. The client is a browser. On mobile, you take a huge part of that processing, a huge part of the stuff that was on servers and everything behind our website, and you put it onto the user device, which you quite often don't control. So it was bad enough we couldn't do with compliance posture. Now all of a sudden we're in the wild. Well, what are a couple examples of this? Well, now that it's out in the wild, a lot of these apps are exposed to code tampering, reverse engineering, things on those lines. And a lot of them are also exposed to things like compromised devices or running on fake Wi-Fi networks. So how does the CISO deal with all of this? And what does the CISO actually want? Well, this is what they want. And this comes from lots and lots of conversations. One of the things I love about our mobile app protection suite, it was built completely by watching, listening, talking to the AppSec and the CISO teams about what they needed. So it wasn't a technology push, it was a customer pull. Quite often using existing technology that we were providing for them to protect their employees on their devices, but we noticed that they were using it differently. And then we determined there was a need to solve these problems. So what they want is they want something that can help them build compliant, then build securely, and then run securely as you go through this cycle. The build compliant part, give me an ability to scan these apps as they're being developed, produce tickets based on whatever policies I've got, and automatically have the developers know what they need to do to go fix it. Do that in real time. Don't require manual pen testing or anything on those lines. Second, I need some ability to obfuscate the code, prevent reverse engineering, change it up, mix it up, so that once it starts going out there and it's on those unmanaged devices, you can't simply reverse engineer our code or start tampering with the app. I need some self-protection capabilities. And then protect me from all the other ugliness that occurs on these quite often unmanaged devices. Fake Wi-Fi networks, malicious apps, compromised devices, malicious profiles. Give me some ability at runtime to be able to determine, am I being attacked, without having to wait until something happens and there's a breach that comes in. So that is, in fact, what we have done as far as designing the Maps app, which Scott is now going to help me step through. We take that exact same thing, we take those exact same 3 buckets, and those are the 3 products, which again, today we're giving you the forest, but then over the next 3 weeks, we're going to step through each one of these in sequence. So if you're interested in each one or any individual one, please come back and listen to the more detailed demonstration type webinars. So first, build compliant. What issues need to get fixed before I release the product? That's called Zscan. Build securely. How do I harden it? How do I prevent reverse engineering? It's called Z-Shield. How do I actually protect myself against all the ugliness and the advanced attacks on those devices, even devices I do not own? That's Z-Defend. So now we're going to step through each one of these in turn. We, meaning Scott, is going to step through each one of these in turn. So Scott, why don't we start off with Zscan, where we're talking about building compliant apps.
Yeah, Zscan is it's an interesting use case because, like you said, JT, customers were actually using the functionality to scan the apps on their enterprise devices, and then they said, "Hey, I'd really like to use this in my app development process." So, if you take a look at left to right, we're going to talk about build time here with Zscan, but essentially, what we're going to do is, as the backlog of features and fixes are being fixed or they're being implemented for the first time by your development organization to produce an app and then push that out into the Play Store, the App Store, and then as users download this, What we're trying to do is really protect the enterprise from exposing themselves to a certain risk. So essentially, as we build the app, what's going to happen is, Zscan is going to tell us, hey, these are some items that are, more risky or not. You may want to fix these, right? And everyone will have their own tolerances, right? So, but it does allow for customization. So if I don't want certain risks exposed in my daily scans, then I can write a policy for that to kind of shove those to the bottom of the list, or not notify my security team, who probably these days, with all of our work from home environments, are exposed to a lot of more issues with all of the remote workforces. So essentially, we're going to automate this risk discovery for you, and we're not going to ask anybody to change the way they work.
And I think that's as we kind of roll through this, folks, you'll notice a couple themes, right? One is the theme that, as I mentioned and Scott just mentioned, this was us directly listening to our customers and saying, how do you want to solve this, right? Across the board. And each one of these steps, you're going to hear that consistently. Second consistent thing is we wanted to make it where, first of all, as the enterprise guys, we know that you can't crush the security teams with a whole bunch of unnecessary alerts. So you need to be able to hone what is being brought to them and what is being alerted on, what is being brought to the surface by their own policies and their own definitions of risk, right? And then the third is, as Scott was just talking about, especially from a developer standpoint, we're trying to make it where they don't have to really do anything differently. And as I mentioned, for us, we actually think it'd be great if the developers didn't even know that Zscan existed. All they know is you got a ticket to go fix something. And Scott, I think those themes are critical, and I would imagine from the conversations you've been having with the customers that those resonate pretty well.
Yeah, mostly the questions really arise from our process issue. No one is interested in slowing down the process, because as kind of a speed of innovation is being demanded, and developers are really compensated on time, right? The faster that they get things done, they can move on to the next. So they don't want to be inundated with with alerts or extra tickets. So we're going to help optimize that, so you can make informed decisions versus having no data at all.
Exactly. So here's a little bit of a visual. Can you step us through this?
Yeah, so essentially what we want the development organization to work just like it is today. So there are two different scenarios. You're either developing an app yourself and you have your own development organization and you have a CI server, Jenkins, or TeamCity. We're just going to integrate into that process and then download and scan that app that you are compiling on a daily, on a weekly, on a monthly basis, whatever tolerance you have. The second scenario is, I am having my app developed for me. So if it's developed for you and you have a service level agreement with your outsourced development partner, you don't really know what is inside your app, or you don't know how they're constructing it. So you can manually upload a outsourced app and get the same information, and then turn that back to your outsourced partner and said, hey, these are above our risk tolerances. We'd really like you to fix this. And so essentially what Zscan does is it looks at your app every day, if you wish. Developers don't have to change the way they work, like we said. We're just going to grab the code from TeamCity or Jenkins or the manual upload, and then we're going to produce a list of findings. And those findings are going to be displayed, I think, on the next screen. I'm not sure. But the findings tell you what is inside your app from a risk tolerance. This is the data leakage that JT talked about. It's permissions. It is whatever is inside of your application that may need to be fixed before it goes into the Play Store. If it needs to be fixed, we're going to automatically create a JIRA ticket and send that back to the developer with incredible detail. So the developer knows exactly where that risk resides in the code, and he can go directly into there. And it really speeds up the process because we're going to provide so much detail back to him. His fix is going to be much, much quicker than trying to look for it himself.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So go through the flow here. We just got finished saying, okay, so now they didn't have an ability without a manual pen test to be able to do what we just got finished talking about doing. It's now streamlined. It's now baked into the process. And so now, based on whatever policies have been set by the security guys, and they say, okay, now this app has passed our checks. And before we put it out in the wild, what can we do to actually prevent any kind of reverse engineering or app tampering? And that is the Z Shield product. So Scott, can you step us through this and then the next couple slides?
Yeah, Z Shield, I mean, essentially before you push your app into the App Store or Google Play, you want to make it really, really difficult to reverse engineer. You don't want to expose any of your secrets. So JT talked about the Tesco Bank. Tesco Bank app, what happened is the mobile app actually exposed information that attackers used to attack the bank and withdraw money overnight. This is not a lengthy attack, right? But what happened is they learned how to facilitate the attack from the mobile app. You want to make that as difficult as possible, right? And another thing that JT said earlier was how these devices, you can see on the right-hand side with all the hands in the air with their mobile devices. You don't own these devices. You don't own the environment that they're running on. So you have no way to understand if it's being attacked or not. So we're going to confuse the attacker and make your app extremely difficult to attack and extremely protected from an information and privacy standpoint. So I think we have an example.
Yeah. Before we do that, can you explain? I noticed on the last one we had a connection with the security team, and they were establishing the policies with Zscan. As we start moving to Z Shield, I noticed that there's information going out each direction, and you include both the security and fraud guys. Can you shed a little bit of light on like how they're fitting into this and how they're benefiting from this?
Yeah, certainly. So I mean, one, from a fraud standpoint, you want to make sure that your app isn't being run in an environment it's not intended to be run in. We've bought farms, any type of reverse engineering that can expose secrets and basically fraudulently, download money or steal money from accounts. From a security team perspective, they're going to understand the mobile exposure from an attack standpoint. So is my app being attacked, actively attacked? If it is, I need to take some action against that, right? So security teams have all these data feeds coming back to them. They only work on items that they have data for. And if you don't have data for the number of times that your app is actively being reverse engineered, you can't remediate that. So both fraud and security, fraud from a enterprise standpoint, hey, we need to hang on to our assets. Security team, we need to facilitate that with a data-driven decision.
Yeah, no, thank you. And then, for me, as we've gotten further and further into this, and again, listen to our customers, major theme. I don't know about you, Scott, but I was downright flabbergasted when I found out that most of the obfuscation solutions on the market today were headless. They didn't have the similar to the compliance part. The only way you could actually kind of to learn anything was a manual physical pen test against the app itself. That whole set of information you were just talking about of giving me visibility into app tampering at runtime just didn't exist. And I don't know about you, but I was flabbergasted by that.
Yeah, it's real interesting. It's like when you raise your kids, you hope you teach them to make good decisions and you send them out in the world. But they don't report back to you their bad decisions. Uh, like only I guess if they get caught, and they have like a criminal record, I guess that report that. But just like that happens, like you develop your app and you send it out in the wild and you hope it doesn't get attacked. And if it does get attacked, you don't know it. But now you do, right? So now some of the obfuscation solutions, including Z Shield, do have a dashboard component for you to read that attack data.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So back to the obfuscation side of things, right? The very beginning part of this, not the real time, ability to know about tampering, but more of the, how do I prevent reverse engineering? That's where I think the next couple slides are just kind of help visualize that, right?
Yeah, so here we have a Android app. On the left-hand side, this is the actual app code. You can read it. So a reverse engineer can actually, look at the entire file and look for authentication tokens, API connections, password authentication, everything that your app does, what part of the operating system it uses, right? This is the entire app. So, if you don't know what you're exposing, you can't really protect yourself. So what we're going to do is with Z Shield, we're going to help you disguise it to make it very, very difficult to reverse engineer. So you can see after Z Shield runs, what happens on the right-hand side after the bracket there is the actual obfuscated app code. It doesn't mean anything. The developer does have basically a mapping file, right? So the developer knows the before and after because he has the file. But the reverse engineer does not. What they see is just a bunch of gibberish and they can't make use of it, and they're probably going to move on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I definitely think this fits into the with targeted attacks, if I'm going after a particular organization, then I'm just going to keep trying to find different ways in. But with a lot of these things, when they're doing reverse engineering and they're going after apps to be able to steal PII or credit card information or whatever, it does go back to the infamous: you don't have to run faster than the bear, you have to run faster than your buddy, right? So to your point, Scott, if you make it a little bit harder on these guys, they're going to go someplace where it's easy. Why not? It's all about return on investment, right? So Zscan determined all these security, privacy, compliance risks in line. Developers don't have to do anything differently. Z Shield enables you to quickly obfuscate that code and then get this kind of app tampering where I can know if you're messing with my app directly. But now we move to all of the other ugliness that can be on these devices that are out, on these devices that we don't own, that are unmanaged devices. I kind of in some ways think of Z Shield as like, a car alarm, right? Well, now where give me some information about the neighborhood I'm parked in, right? And that's what Z Defend is all about. And ZDefend is an extension of our machine learning based engine that we use on Zips, which protects employee devices. But in this case, it's an SDK where we can actually drop the protection, machine learning based ability to detect device attacks, network, phishing, malicious apps in real time on device, but it's inside of the app itself. So the app can be self aware and potentially self defending. So Scott, can you step us through ZDefend?
Yeah, so ZDefend, if we look, left to right, this is for consistency. We have our build and runtime. This is the security at runtime. So just like JT, you were saying, the car alarm in the neighborhood, right? So the neighborhood is the unknown, right? And unless you live there and you have a bunch of contextual knowledge, but you don't control everybody's device that they use, right? So just today iOS 13.4 came out. There were lots of vulnerabilities in there for escalations, for other apps seeing other apps, for Bluetooth vulnerabilities. Those exist. And our data shows that 1 in 4 enterprise employees don't update their device or their environment or neighborhood, as you said, JT. And these are employees with security training and security teams, so they are exposed to what to do and what not to do. Consumers, completely different, right? They update their devices even slower. So Zdefend from a fraud team, the fraud team can use this data to really understand who is a riskier device or user than another. If there's a jailbroken device, maybe I don't want to allow that user to initiate a new payee via their mobile. I'll make them do it via the browser, for example. Or maybe they're operating in some other part of the world, and you don't want them to initiate some type of new payment transfer, something like that. So the security team, I mean, they're going to use this data. They get this data for traditional endpoints all the time, server-based products, browser-based products. They don't get this data from mobile. So, you know, they're used to handling the incident response systems. You know, they have processes, they have teams, they have procedures that they follow to remediate attacks, but they're not getting the mobile attack data. Well, now they can with ZDefend.
Yeah, so I think it's you know, this is you know, great information right off the board, right? So this is an SDK that gets dropped in, very quick, you know, 15-minute setup, you know, doesn't add a lot of size to the app, you know, all the rest of that fun stuff. And then to your point, Scott, the first thing is you can't manage what, I mean, everybody said it before, right? So BFO, blinding flash of the obvious. You can't manage what you don't measure, right? So first thing, you get this data that comes in, and either the security guys are going to deal with it or the fraud guys. So for instance, we have a mobile banking customer that said in the first 30 days that we had this running, they had information that enabled them to have visibility into a potential $1 billion worth of fraud. So now they can do something about it, right? So, but then the choice is totally up to the developer, right, Scott? I mean, we're providing the information. In this case, unlike Zips, which is our app that runs 100% of the time on the device that we use to protect employees, we provide the information and you can do something with it, let's say on the back end, on the fraud part. You also could choose, if you wanted to do something with the user experience as well, right? So I know we're going to kind of step through some of the slides, but what are your thoughts about that, Scott? I mean, have you seen any, you know, kind of approaches? Do people start with, you know, get the information, absorb it first, and then start to move to some user notifications? I mean, what are your thoughts just about both parts of that equation?
Yeah, 100% of the time, the teams are sensitive to the user experience, because you know there are big corporate marketing budgets pushing traffic to the mobile devices. So they're conditioned via the internal communications that mobile is everything. So they're real sensitive to that. So when we explain to them the data that's going back and forth and the possible data that we could show to the user, immediately they say, whoa, 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 you know, can I customize the user experience? With 100% of the time that question is asked, and the answer, of course, right? It is your app. We're just going to provide you the data on whether or not to make a decision, right? You can gather the data and use it for fraud. You know, we do have some customers that actually just consume the data, and in the back end, they change the policies for certain segments of users. You know, just like when your credit card company sends you a notice that says, "Hey, your interest rate goes up," right? You don't know why. You just think everybody's interest rate goes up, but it's actually a subset of users because of their risk profile. So the same type of idea can happen with all your mobile users.
Exactly. So I think we have a couple slides here that kind of show the back end part, and then one example potentially of the customer piece, right?
Yeah, I mean the beauty of the entire suite that JT's taken us through is this is all resident on one dashboard. So you get all of your mobile threat data in one spot. This is your scanning data. This is your app tampering attack data from Z-Shield, and then from Z-Defend, it's active attacks on devices that are running out in the wild. So you get it all in one spot, and your security team can, you know, integrate this information with systems that they're already using, like Splunk.
So
And
these are just
again,
a couple
yeah, it's
examples.
just another screenshot of the dashboard. It basically shows you what type of environments are running your app, and you get this per app. So if you have several apps, you can understand that, you know, my user distribution is one way or another, and I can make other decisions based on that. So I can, you know, Maybe I limit someone that is on a very old version of Android or iOS.
Or like you said, depending on your policy, you could say, if they're on older versions, I'm just going to up their fraud score a little bit potentially, right?
Yeah,
Um,
if they're on an old version with freely downloadable exploits, if you just Google remote access toolkit or Trojan, you can find the actual code and download it yourself and see how that works. Those are in applications that may be on your device, but the same type of idea. I can change my policies based on whatever information that I may be gathering. We're just going to provide you more detailed information.
exactly. So I got this information, and then completely up to the app developer is, do you want to notify the user when you discover anything? So can you kind of step through these three examples?
Yeah, so these are user notifications based on one of our demonstration apps. So we have a demonstration app, ZBank, and we show this to banks because they have a very low tolerance for fraud, right? A lot of money going in and out of mobile devices as our currency moves to digital. More and more payments are happening, at mobile devices and mobile terminals. So they're curious, hey, can you detect, or how do you detect and how do you warn the user what is happening on his or her device? So on the left-hand side, what we're doing is we're detecting a rogue Wi-Fi. So the application itself that you own, yet you don't own the operating system, warns that this is an unsafe Wi-Fi that you're banking on. In the center here, app tampering, this will be your Z Shield type of functionality. It says, hey, app tampering detected has been detected on your device, and we're going to make your app read only. So essentially, you can't provide any new functions. And on the right-hand side, system tampering. If you're in an environment that's not safe and someone tries to drop a file onto your device while you're using this app, we're going to allow you to notify the user in any language that you'd like. So you can have users all over the world, and you can customize that and provide them more information. Call this number, click this link. You can do whatever you wish. It's your app.
That is perfect. And so to wrap it up, because we're right at 30 minutes, you can see that these are the three components going along the development to runtime, cycle. You build compliant, which is Zscan. You build secure and harden it, which is ZShield, and you run secure with ZDefend. And like we talked about, next week, Scott and our general manager for the MAPS business, the application security business, Nitin, are going to step through Zscan. Then 2 weeks, we'll do ZShield, and then we'll do ZDefend. Again, all of them will be archived and available for anybody that wants to come. So if you can't make it in real time, please come back and watch them after the fact. But with that, we're going to stop for questions. And as we wait for any questions to come in, Scott, anything else that we missed or you would like to re-emphasize before we wrap up?
No, I'd just like to offer our time for customized questions. If you don't want to ask a question now, you can email us, contact us on social. We're everywhere. So as you work from home, just let us know what kind of question you have and what kind of operating system you may be interested in securing.
That's perfect. Well, I don't see any questions. And since we are now past the top of the hour, I would just like to thank everybody for joining us. And Scott, thanks once again for joining, and I'm looking forward to your session next week.
All right, my pleasure, JT.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great day.